It's been a great 2 days. It's an honor to be here in front of you to talk about this very important discussion, open source development and funding our contributors. The future of Bitcoin relies on the open source foundations that it is built on. We can't rely on closed source software. We must have open software and open systems. And these great people that I have alongside me today have been focused on funding that and fostering that. So to start, I would think it'd be great if Mike Schmidt over here at Brink could give us a little explanation of the differences between open source and closed source software and why that matters.
Sure. Yeah. Well, there's two ways of developing software. You have this closed source system that many people are familiar with. Most of the software that maybe you have used in the last day could be closed source software in which you do not have access to the source code. You do not have the ability to modify that source code. And then you have the stack of Bitcoin Core software, Lightning software, built on open source principles, meaning that you do have access to that source code. Not only do you have the right to view that source code and change that source code, but you have the right to review that source code, and your peers are reviewing that source code, and it brings a higher degree of confidence in the software that you're running. And I think that's important for a monetary system, that whole stack be open source. So not just the Bitcoin Core software, but the layers on top of that, potentially the wallet software as well, and even the operating systems that you're running all of this software on.
Thank you, Mike. That was a really great explanation. We have Fang here from OKCoin. Hong, with your experience here, I mean, OKCoin has really stepped up to the plate and started funding Bitcoin contributors and other open source devs. What have you learned from that experience? How has that, affected your judgment going forward, future initiatives?
Sure. Yeah. First of all, when it comes to supporting open source developers for Bitcoin Core, to us, we don't like talking about it as donation. We actually think about it as investment, because we are all here to really build the ecosystem. We come here because we believe in the future of Bitcoin as not free money, but money of freedom, and that actually takes a lot of work behind the scenes. As an exchange, we participate by building a free marketplace, but at the same time, we also want to invest in supporting those developers behind the scenes who are continuing to build and improve that underlying layer. To Mike's point, there is open source versus closed source, but when it comes to the monetary layer, we think that it is really important to keep that open source because that gives transparency and censorship resistance. So when we think about investment in that space, there are a couple of principles that we really stick to. First of all, we think that it's important to keep it independent. And that's why our grant to the developers or projects are all no strings attached. And we also want to, thank you. And we also make sure that it's non-exclusive. So if the developer or project want to get funding from other sources, as long as the other sources are also no strings attached, we're totally open to it. But there are challenges in the process. We've been doing this for the last 2 years, and have been learning a lot from both the developers and projects we have been sponsoring, as well as from friends like Mike, like OpenSats and Chaincode and Scrap Crypto. So we've been learning a lot, and there are a couple of challenges that we have been dealing with. First of all, the first challenge was really to figure out where to invest, because we do have limited resources. Up to date, our investment in sponsoring the developers is up to $1 million, which is about $500,000 a year. To us, it's a pretty significant amount of money, but when you think about the funding need of the developer, it's actually a very small amount. So how do we prioritize when we invest that amount of money in this space so that we feel like it's actually getting the most impact. So that's number one. I'll talk about what we ultimately decided in investing, but number two is who to invest in. You know, it's a very specialized space, you know, and neither me nor anyone in my organization are particularly a Bitcoin developer, core developer. So to identify who are the developers that we want to support that are aligned with our strategy is a lot of work. But thankfully, we do get a lot of help from, again, the community, starting with Steve from Square Crypto, a chain coach, John, and others. And then the last challenge is how to make it really sustainable and scalable. Again, you know, related back to the limited resources and also the fact that I think it's important to keep the developer funding really diversified. So for us, it's about keeping our format of funding flexible while sticking to the previously described principle. But at the same time, we really need more participants in the space to provide funding support in different formats. And also there's educational piece in it, right? Because most recently we did a survey actually with our OKCoin users about open source developer and how they think about it. It's surprising to us that 80% plus of the participants in the survey, they don't know how open source developers in Bitcoin Core is being funded. 40% of them think that they get paid when every one of us make Bitcoin transaction. Probably another 40% think that miners pay them. Hopefully that will become reality at some point. But most of them actually don't know that they actually have to go out and try to find a way to support themselves. But after they realize that it's actually out there, they are actually very much willing to participate. They're very supportive of organizations like us or individuals out there to really support the developer grant. 80% plus actually want that. And then 25% actually are saying, hey, actually, when I come to do trading on your platform, I'm happy to scrap the dust in our transaction and sweep the dust into a quote-unquote investment or funding of a developer. 20% are actually willing to, they want to see us matching their investment donation. So I think that's quite encouraging.
Really great insights. We really appreciate everything you guys do over at OKCoin. You touched on a point there that it seems extremely important to me and very good to see that there's so many different new avenues of funding developers. And it seems to be growing at a really quick pace. I'd like to bring Ben Price into the discussion. He is the founder of OpenSats Initiative, a new open source funding initiative primarily focused on Bitcoin. He's also previously Visa Crypto, which a lot of people don't know. And I'm kind of curious where you see your experiences at Visa Crypto coming into funding open source devs and joining the wider open source community.
It's an interesting question. I would say Visa prepared me for how the real world businessy enterprises think about things. And they love stable coins and CBDC, so I don't want to talk about that here. But for open source, there are a lot of companies that are giving back. There are a lot of businesses that are probably doing better that deserve a better spotlight. But yeah, I think the real reason I was excited about actually going to Visa, if you want some inside information, is because I thought if there's a company that maybe could go out and change the world and initiate a change, it was maybe them. But what I learned was it's going to have to be a free and open source movement because they're slow. Enterprises suck, guys. They're slow. The top 50, 100 organizations are not there because they're changing the world. They're there because they're the big behemoths. So it requires this weird low-level grassroots movement from everyone. Whether you're running a node or a small business, it doesn't matter. You have to leverage the software and the resources that are there outside of your software for service. Like, don't pay $20 a month for it. Go fucking find the free version that's free and open source. That's what we're here about. If everyone builds on that and everyone utilizes that, the world becomes a smarter place. And that's what we're on the precipice of.
So Hong also touched on a very interesting point, and I'd like to get Mike's opinion here. The differences between how a open source developer tries to monetize, or an open source project tries to monetize versus a closed source project, it's vastly different, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And in most cases, with the Bitcoin Core software, with some of the Lightning implementations, that open source software is freely available, and there's not necessarily a monetization model for the folks that are working on Bitcoin Core or some of the related protocol work there.
Thank you, all the core devs.
Yeah. Thank you, core devs.
Seriously, yes.
To sort of bat the point home a bit, we talked today about serving billions and onboarding billions and miners and the investment side of Bitcoin. But at the end of the day, none of that is possible without the developers. And I think Satoshi rightly gets a lot of credit for releasing Bitcoin, but I think there's maybe a gap in the appreciation of what he did and where he left off, and where the additional 800 or plus more contributors to the Bitcoin Core software have taken things. And I think it's important to realize that. Again, contrasting open and closed source software, if we call Bitcoin a $1 trillion network, $1 trillion market cap, however you want to think about that. If you look at a similar, I'd say like a closed source business, let's say Facebook, which is about a $1 trillion network as well. How many engineers do they have supporting that $1 trillion value? Thousands? I don't know the actual number, but thousands maybe. And how many Bitcoin Core developers are there working full-time on Bitcoin? The answer is, if you look at the contributor list, there's 800 contributors there, and that's great, but it's really sort of a power law distribution, and there's really only a handful of developers that are making regular contributions, maybe something like 30. So if you contrast, it's apples to oranges a bit, but to give you a framework to think about that, that's 30 developers supporting a $1 trillion network versus thousands of full-time engineers supporting, a $1 trillion Facebook. So
I mean, that's a very interesting point you made, and I feel like it'd be a great time to highlight how Brink is unique in how they try and bring in new developers. Like, how can we bring in more open source contributors to grow that number? I mean, we have 12,000 people here, and like you said, we have 30 extremely talented developers, and then a wider community of developers that's maybe 2,000 or something like that. But it's really a fraction, especially if you consider how many users we have on the network, right?
Yeah, exactly. And Brink. We are a 501c3 not-for-profit organization that takes in funds from the community, be that individuals or organizations, and then finds the best place for those funds to go. We have two different programs where those funds are spent. Our first program is a traditional grants program. We try to target at least 1 year so that there's some sustainability on the developer side. They don't just get maybe a 2-month, 3-month runway. We want them to have a year with a grant, knowing that they have that money for at least that year, and we hope to roll that into several years. And then we have the other side of our programs, which is our fellowship program, which is what Matt was alluding to, which is not necessarily funding existing proven developers, but budding core developers and protocol developers that have shown promise, but have not either had the experience or the time to become full-time contributors. And what that program allows is for a sponsored fellow to actually travel to our new office in London and work with my co-founder, John Newberry, who is a prolific core developer, and they work together day in and day out, and it's called a fellowship, but really day one, the fellows are going to be in there making contributions. This isn't some sort of a training session for a year. It's sort of trial by fire. And so we actually announced our first fellow recipient several months ago, and Gloria's was able to get to London finally, and we have an office there now. Things are opening back up a bit, and so she'll be working there for the next year. And on the other side of things, we actually funded 3 full-time grant applicants that are working on Bitcoin open source software.
Yeah.
It's really impressive what you guys are doing over there. I feel like you're really pushing forward the space in a lot of ways, and I'm curious from Hong's point of view. You know, we don't really see that many exchanges and large companies, you know, contributing back to Bitcoin. Do you view your company as kind of a trailblazer in that to try and influence the other companies to participate?
I hope that what we are doing are a call to many other participants in the industry to also give back to Bitcoin community, because we are here not only because the price of Bitcoin will go up, but also because we want to build it into a foundation of a new future. And that would, again, not be true unless we actually invest in the developer who are building it. And we're also very happy to see actually more and more industry participants are hearing us and many others that actually do that before us and start to contribute, and hope to see more of that. Organizations like Brink, like open source, are serving as very important components of that and providing different channels. When we think about, again, investing in this space and how do we prioritize our resources, you know, we look at protocol level developers who really invest in the protocol level, particularly focused on privacy and security. We look at adoption, for example, BTC Pay, who basically provide that P2P payment to promote the adoption of Bitcoin. We recently did a grant with Anton, who are working on Lightning, and we integrated Lightning to our exchange platform as well. Recently, we did a Schwa, who are focused on going to focus on making it more mobile too. But the biggest thing is how to make it sustainable and scalable. And I think organizations like Brink and OpenStats are an important component to that. The mentorship part that they provide to new developers.
So, first of all, congratulations on Lightning. It was really great to see, one of the first exchanges to do it. So we heard about what makes Brink unique. We heard about what makes OKCoin unique. I'm curious, Ben, you know, OpenSats is very new.
It's the most unique company there is, actually.
I'd be curious, I think the listeners and the audience would be interested to know where you feel like OpenSats fits in this greater funding initiatives, right?
Yeah. So, fun fact, I almost gave up on OpenSats like right after I started. I realized it was going to be a ton of work, and I thought it was going to be easier. It turns out it wasn't that easy. There's a lot of rules and regulations. Matt helped me get through that. I'd say OpenSats' niche is like, if you specifically, I'll keep this short because there's a countdown like timer up here. You guys can't see it, but it's kind of intimidating. So I'll try and keep it short. Basically, if you want to come to a website, if you are benefiting from Bitcoin or other free and open source software, which is like what it's all about, but like, come on, if you're benefiting from Bitcoin, which I think we all are, you should give back to the people that help maintain it, because we are all winning right now.
Yep.
Like, so the thing that I saw was, one, I hated when I saw charities when I was little that the people in charge took all the money, so everything's passed through, 100% passed through. If you give us $1, you know $1's going through. So even if you make a mistake and give to like some crappy project, which they're out there, I mean, yeah, but like it's free and open source. So come give to your core devs $20, $30 a month, and you're gonna be making a good decision and supporting the people out here who are literally doing something. And if you're doing something, come sign up. Get donated to. Sometimes people want to give Bitcoin to you. Sometimes they want to give you Visa and MasterCard traditional stuff. Who cares? All that we care about is that you're building something that's free and open source, and it's scalable, and the world can use it. And that's literally why everyone should be in this room right now. So
Yeah.
that's the pitch.
So Mike, you know, we're getting closer to the end of this panel.
Yeah.
I think I think you have an announcement for the audience that you want to discuss out here. Very big announcement, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. So we just got word that OKCoin, Hong and team, will be donating $100,000 to Brink's General Programs Fund with no strings attached.
Let's go.
That donation, we didn't touch on this, but that donation was made in Bitcoin. Which
Did it happen like 2 minutes ago? We didn't even talk about this.
it was a secret.
It's real time.
So we're very grateful for that, and I think, Hong, you can maybe speak a little bit to funding individual developers versus organizations and how you think about that.
Yeah, no, actually, what I want to say is the reason, again, we partner with Brink is because that educational piece, the building the developer ecosystem piece is really important, and I think their organization actually put a lot of emphasis on that, providing that mentorship to up-to-come developers. So I hope that what we're doing here is just the starting point, and many of you can actually start to think about, okay, maybe I should also talk to Mike or Ben,
Yeah.
and
Ben.
think about how we can contribute. We also want to continue to explore. We are actually discussing how we can actually integrate Brink and open source OpenSats solution into our platform. So when you come to trade or buy crypto, buy Bitcoin, you can also participate, because this Bitcoin is ultimately a community movement. It's a technology movement. It's a community movement. Relying on any single organization or individual, either for funding or for developer initiatives, is quite dangerous. So I think making it more decentralized is always a good thing for us. So think about that.
Thank you, Hong. Thank you, Mike. So guys, this has been a great panel. You have an audience of about 5,000 people in front of us, even more more through the streams.
The streams?
There's 2 streams.
Good.
Maybe I
good.
think
I
it goes
was
through
wondering about
LinkedIn
the
too.
streams.
Let's get some final thoughts here. You have the audience, 30 seconds each, starting with Ben.
Tight
Let's
timeline.
go.
Okay. So if you care about open source software, if you love Bitcoin, if you want to give back, if you want to contribute, go to opensats.org or just like look around. There's a lot of wonderful contributors here. We didn't even say thank you yet, so thank you to everyone here in the open source community. It's the best one, and I'm over my 30 seconds, so come find me. I like talking to people. We'll all be around, so it's your turn, Mike.
If you're an individual, look at OpenStats, look at Bitcoin DevList, look at Brink, and you can contribute those ways individually from a financial perspective. I think also vote with your dollars and throw your weight around as an end user and a consumer. If there's an exchange that isn't supporting open source software in the way you'd like, and could be a contributor, reach out and use your influence in that way as well. If you're an organization looking to understand more about supporting Bitcoin development and the different programs that we have, feel free to visit brink.dev and learn a little bit more about what we're doing.
Last night, I saw on Twitter someone saying that what's happening yesterday and today here reminded them of 2017. I think that is not right, because in 2017, there's a lot more exuberance about price. But here today, there's a lot more focus on value, on education, on building. I think every one of us can be part of that building efforts, either directly or indirectly. So, yeah, encourage every one of you to check those guys out, and also feel free to reach out to us. And if you are interested in participate, we'll try to make it easy for you as we speak.
Thank you, guys. Big thank you to our panel. Big thank you to our audience. Big thank you to our open source contributors. And big thank you to Bitcoin Magazine for hosting this fantastic discussion. Thank you, guys.
Stay humble. Back that.